Hi everyone, this is Jason Burek of Wall Street from Main Street, and today Mo DeWood and I are joined by a very special guest. Our special guest for today's podcast is Jeff Berwick. Jeff is the founder of Stockhouse, and he's also the dollar vigilante. Jeff is a very successful investor and entrepreneur, and Jeff is from Canada and now resides in Mexico. How are you doing today, Jeff?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you guys?
Doing good. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I'm just happy the power is back on. We had a little power outage here in the D.C. area I live for a little, so I'm just happy it's back on and we can do the interview.
Well, you do live in a third world country, so these things do happen.
Okay, so let me jump right in here to the interview, Jeff. Start with some of my questions here. The first question I have for you is the Ben Bernanke and Ron Paul, grilling in Congress, where Ben Bernanke said that gold is not money. He said it's only an asset. He said, the Federal Reserve, we keep gold on our balance sheet, solely as a historical thing, as an asset thing. What is your opinion about this? Do you think Ben Bernanke is really this dumb, or do you think he's intentionally trying to lie, trying to keep the people from realizing and more people from waking up?
That's always the question when it comes to government or central banks. Are they evil, or are they just really that stupid? And that's always the biggest question. And, I've looked at Ben Bernanke, and, I have to say, he sits there and his lips quiver and his voice shakes, and he looks scared to death. And, I'd have to say that if I had to put a bet on it, I'd say that he actually believes the stuff he's saying. And he was probably put into place as Federal Reserve Chairman because he does believe that, because he believes that just printing more money can actually help economies, and counterfeiting money helps economies. But, that's really, I think he is actually believes what he says. But that at the same time is also just as scary, because I actually would almost prefer if he was just an evil guy who was trying to destroy the dollar, because at least then we could gauge him better. With him actually believing this stuff, who knows? He could really never give up on this, and as things get worse and worse, he could just throw more and more money until it actually reaches Zimbabwe-style hyperinflation, which is a definite possibility the way it's headed right now.
Oh, that's a great point. I mean, I watched that interview with Ron Paul and Ben Bernanke, and he kind of paused for a second when he asked him if gold is money. Then he said no. So I actually thought he was lying in front of Congress, that he actually does know that gold is money.
Well, there's actually two ways to look at that. One is, for sure, you look at the U.S. Constitution, and in the U.S. Constitution, not that anyone cares what that says anymore, apparently, but it says nothing but gold and silver coin can be a tender in payment of debts. And so from that perspective, he's totally lying. However, from a true actual fact perspective of what is money today, he's actually correct. You can't go to Walmart and buy things with gold. You just can't. There might be a couple of places that accept it, but overall it actually isn't money today. So if he was answering from that perspective, he's correct. But just the fact that he's actually doing what he's doing and creating the Federal Reserve notes, and they're being used as money in the U.S. is actually against the Constitution right there. And so right there, he should be arrested and put in jail. I don't understand how this Federal Reserve's even lasted this long. It was founded in 1913, and it's going to be really close if they make it to 100 years, to 2013. I actually don't think it will at this point. It's collapsing really fast. People are starting to wake up to what a fraud it is, and how this isn't really anything to do with free market money at all. This has nothing to do with capitalism. This is a completely artificial, non-free market system that has been put in place by the U.S. government, and it actually has been destroying the U.S. ever since it was founded through inflation.
And speaking of money, yesterday was the 40th anniversary of when Richard Nixon killed any dignity that the dollar had by removing the gold standard, or the partial gold standard, off the dollar. Now, what is the one thing, one either stat or one theory or anything that people should know about the dollar right after Nixon removed the gold standard?
Well, just as we were just talking about, ever since the Federal Reserve was created, the dollar's been on a one-way direction, and that's down. And all that happened in 1971, on August 15th, 1971, was the U.S. was still on a gold standard to some extent. Americans weren't allowed to own gold, of course, in the land of the free. They weren't allowed to own gold. But foreign central banks were allowed to turn in their dollars for gold with the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Treasury. And what happened was, through the Vietnam War and all of the social programs in the 1960s, the Great Grand New Society and all these programs, the U.S. was basically bankrupt. It was actually the second time. The first time the U.S. went completely bankrupt and had to devalue the money was in 1933, when they confiscated all the gold from Americans at $20 an ounce and immediately popped it up to $35 an ounce. So that was the first time that they actually went bankrupt. The second time was August 15th, 1971, when Nixon realized if he kept the gold window open much longer, that all the foreign central banks would own every ounce of gold that supposedly is in Fort Knox. We don't even know if there's anything there because it hasn't been seen since the 1950s. So I have a little rule that if you haven't seen something in 60 or 70 years, it's probably not there. But that's what happened on 1971, and every single chart of every single thing changed in 1971. If you value everything in dollars, and that's how most people look at their stock charts and the price of stocks and the price of gold, they compare it to the value of the dollar. And so you just look at every single thing since 1971, and it's turned into a hockey stick graph going up. And it's really just ruined the entire U.S. economy, and it's helped to ruin a lot of the entire world economy, because inflation is terrible, because it's very hard to invest properly when the money's continually devaluing, and it's done nothing but even go down even further ever since 2008. So we're headed for the third bankruptcy or default of the U.S. government coming up sometime soon, and the only options they have are to default, which was actually something that was thought about during the debt ceiling so-called debate, and the other option is for Ben Bernanke to do his thing and to hyperinflate the dollar. In either case, it's going to be very bad, so that's why here at the Dollar Vigilante we're mostly invested into things like gold and hard assets, because we believe that everything right now, anything that's printed on a piece of paper is basically worth the paper it's printed on. We're going to see just an unbelievable period of time here for the next few years, and it's really a time for people to protect themselves and be in hard assets, because those are things that, especially if the hard assets are outside of places like the U.S., those are things that the U.S. government can't take away from you, and they can't inflate away from you.
Yeah, and to add to your points, Jeff, I think the commodities themselves, like either physical gold and silver bullion or the commodity producers, those guys are going to respond the quickest to, the inflation that's being created. Now, I know, the corrections are going to be painful, but you're also going to see the increases in these things the most, the fastest, are going to respond the fastest. My next question for you, Jeff, is about an asset allocation type of strategy. Where do you think people should have their assets allocated in terms of a percentage of physical bullion and gold and silver bullion, and then actually in the mining shares? What types of factors do you think people should be calculating out before they figure out a good individual asset allocation strategy?
Well, on Dollar Vigilante, we give a general portfolio allocation that we just say is a general one for if you're going to just talk to your man on the street. You didn't know anything about his personal needs or anything. So this is very generalized, but we basically say gold bullion, and that, when I say gold, I mean silver a lot as well. So you can basically lump the two in together, but I usually just say gold because it's such a bigger market. Gold, we say hold actual bullion, so the real thing, and it doesn't have to be the real thing in your hands, but at least you know it's the real thing sitting in a vault somewhere, like in Switzerland or wherever, through goldmoney.com or Bullion Vault. We say 30% gold. We actually say 20% cash, and that's just to take advantage of any corrections or any crashes. We're not expecting a 2008 style crash coming around anytime soon. But even right now, some of the gold stocks are down, so we've been buying those up with our cash. We've got 15% in agriculture, so again, just hard assets that people need no matter what. Even if we have a complete currency collapse, people need food. 15% we have in gold major stocks, so those are the big ones like Agnico Eagle and Newmont and things like that, and 15% in the juniors. And that is the reason we don't have that allocation bigger than that is because they have such high profit potential. These things can go up thousands of percent, but at the same time, they're quite risky. They can go down 90% or even 100% sometimes very quickly. So we just have 15% of the portfolio for those, and they're basically a lottery ticket, and we're expecting those to really do well over the next couple of years, like really well, thousands of percent gains. So there's no need to have your whole portfolio in juniors. That's just too risky for most people. If you want to gamble, that's fine, but if you want to invest, that's not the way to go. And the final 5% we have is in energy. And I would like to have more than 5% in energy, but we're just so bullish on the gold and even things like agriculture that I just snuck just 5% into that, and we mostly just have that in uranium stocks right now. But I think there's lots of great investments in energy overall, but that's not really our specialty either. We more specialize on the gold side, so we just 5% into a general uranium stock fund, and that's where we have that small allocation for energy. But that's generally our portfolio for our general portfolio for the general person.
Okay, Jeff, I have a follow-up question. You talked about cash, and you said your bullion holdings, like which are more, as insurance and wealth preservation of the wealth and the purchasing power you already have, are like a separate holding from cash. And I know some money managers and asset allocators have those mixed in together. So I was wondering then, in your cash position there, if you would consider, U.S. dollars as a part of that, and not to worry too much about a short-term devaluation in the short term, or do you think people should go and buy Canadian dollars or Australian dollars or some of the stronger Asian currencies or Brazilian real? Do you think people should have a basket then of foreign currencies as cash?
The way we look at it is the cash is mostly sitting there to take advantage of short-term dips or corrections. So we don't think of it as being very long-term. So even in that case, we would hold U.S. dollars. And actually, we're quite bullish on the U.S. dollar compared to other currencies, not compared to gold or anything like that, but compared to other currencies, we're fairly bullish because it's been beaten down so much. The Australian dollar is up, I don't know, more than 50% in the last 2 years against the U.S. dollar. The same with the Swiss franc, and Canadian dollar has done very well as well. So, and you look at what's happening right now in these other currencies. You look at the Swiss franc, and it's gone up so much that they're panicking over there because all their exporting industries are going to be not able to export because their franc is worth too much. So what's going to happen over there is they're probably going to devalue the Swiss franc. So all of these fiat currencies are in a race to the bottom, and that's what's going on right now. And they're all just trying to. It's everything to do with governments and central banks is the exact opposite of what would normally be done. So instead of wanting their currencies to go up, they all want them to go down because they perceive that there's some sort of value, or they have to compete with other countries for exports and things like that. So this whole fiat currency system is screwed up everything about how the market should work. So, but we have, for example, right now we say just keep the currency mostly in what you expect to buy. So if you're expecting to buy some Canadian mining stocks in the next 3 months, keep it in Canadian dollars. If you're going to buy some U.S. mining stocks or gold in the U.S., keep it in U.S. dollars. We used to recommend the Swiss franc, but it's gone up so much now that we've basically cut that out now, and we're just basically saying just keep it in whatever currency you expect to be buying things with it in the next few months.
Yeah, and the Swiss are stepping in here in the currency markets here, and they want to devalue their currency too. And then you're starting to hear conflicting stories about they might want to back it by gold. But I just don't see any central banker from any country wanting to be the first gold-backed currency. I just don't see it.
Yeah, it's really almost impossible to do from a political perspective because that's exactly the problem that the Swiss franc has right now. It's gone up so much because it actually has a fair amount of gold in Switzerland that they say could be backed by the franc if they wanted it to. And so it's gone up a lot because gold's gone up a lot, and it's causing major problems over there right now because when you have a world with all these different fiat currencies, you actually do have to just keep devaluing it along with the others, or you'll see see your economy, at least your exports, come to a screeching halt. And when that happens, a lot of people in your country, and most of these countries are democracies now, are going to start yelling and screaming at politicians, and that's what happens, and they have to devalue as well. So while it would make sense for, like I said, everything that the governments do is almost always the opposite of what a rational person would do. So a rational person would just own gold. But these governments, these democracies, and these the way the governments work today, which are just atrocious, basically they have to almost devalue their fiat currencies until the whole thing collapses, or else they'll have major political problems in their country.
Going back to your asset allocation, what is your opinion on people investing in royalty companies such as Silver Wheaton and Franco-Nevada? Do you favor those over senior producers such as Newmont?
I don't. I look at them both as being good. I really do like the Silver Wheatons and all those sort of things. Those are great, obviously. We like both of them. We don't really discriminate too much. We like both. I think there's upsides and downsides to both, but both are great places to be, and depending on what you need, whether it's more income related or it's more safety related, is how you should play that, because obviously the producers actually have these things. So in worst case scenario, they still have them, whereas the Silver Wheaton type companies, they just have a contract to sell them, and who knows, So I would say basically own both, and for the time being, until we see how the direction of this fiat currency system goes. But they're both good investments in my opinion.
What is your opinion on silver? Now, silver is the poor man gold. It's an industrial metal. It's also been used as money in history. Do you prefer silver more to gold, or are you more on the gold camp?
From a direct safety point of view, we lean a little bit more towards gold. That has been 100% money throughout the last 5,000 years, whereas silver has sort of been and sort of hasn't been at certain points. And as you said, silver is a bit more of an industrial metal. However, I'm actually at this moment quite bullish on silver personally, just because silver got taken down with this last downswing in the markets, because sometimes it acts like a money precious metal, and sometimes it acts like an industrial metal. And for the last few months, it's been acting like an industrial metal. So it's been going flat or down for the last few months, and gold has been going up a lot. So for people who don't own either right now, I would definitely weight more to silver, because I foresee it for sure becoming a lot more monetary as time goes by, rather than an industrial metal.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jeff. And, I was running the numbers on the gold to silver ratio right before the interview started. And, we're right around 45-ish or so right now. And, I expected the gold to silver ratio to be around 30, by the end of this year. So I think there's good odds that we could get a gold to silver ratio around 30, maybe even lower than 30 in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yes, it's definitely possible, and that's why I basically said that I'm leaning a little bit more towards silver at the moment, but I think both are good places to be. But if you're looking to buy tomorrow, I would lean more definitely towards silver. It looks like it has more upside potential and doesn't appear to have too much downside potential, although it could. Anything can happen in a short term, and it did have quite a rise there when it hit up so high, but it has come off quite a bit from its highs as well. So that's another good thing about it. So yes, I'm definitely if I was buying tomorrow, I'd buy more silver than I would gold.
I want to shift our focus to the U.S. economy. Now, with all the bailout, stimulus, debt downgrade, debt ceiling keep going up, and you're a firm believer in Austrian economic. I want to connect the two together. Does this country need Austrian economic free market thinking more now than ever before in history?
Yes. But, it obviously would have helped to have known some of this stuff before they even started the Federal Reserve and before they went off the gold standard originally in 1933 and before they completely delinked gold in 1971. It's tough to say when it would have been best, but really this whole Keynesian economics is it's so played out and it's so obviously wrong. And Paul Krugman of the New York Times was on CNN yesterday, and he came up, this was his plan. These are the Keynesian plans. The Austrian side are all very simple. They basically say free markets, so the government should stay out of things, and everything the government does makes things worse. And Paul Krugman, who's a Keynesian, went on CNN yesterday, and his big plan was, and this isn't a joke, he said we should come up with a fake alien attack, and for a couple of years, people will build rockets and laser guns to get ready for the alien attack, and then in a few years we'll tell them it was fake. But by then, the economy will be doing really well because we would have stopped doing everything we're doing for a few years. We'd stop making iPads and flat-screen TVs and producing food, and we would just create alien-killing weapons and using all our resources to do that. And he thinks that will help the world somehow. And that's how they are. And these are the people in charge. People like Ben Bernanke believe Keynesian economics. And that's the economics they actually teach in school in the U.S. and in actually a lot of places in the Western world. And it's completely garbage, completely makes no sense. Even a child could figure it out. The thought that you can actually somehow improve an economy by counterfeiting money and putting it into the economy, and these things are just so far debunked and so obvious, but people still haven't caught on. And a big part of that is because in the U.S. and most Western countries, they still have the governments, and governments are a big part of the education system. So they never teach you all through your life anything about money, anything about how the money system works or the central banks or anything like that. So everyone has basically a zero IQ, so they can't figure it out. They've never been taught this stuff. And that's the way the government wants it, because the government gets huge benefits from this Keynesian inflationary system. Without it, they couldn't have any of their wars. They couldn't have any of the welfare system because these things could not be paid for with tax revenue, and it's a proven fact they can't now. And so the only way to keep these things going and to have their wars and to have their welfare state is to continue to inflate, because inflation is a third tax, and it's the only way to keep this game going. So yes, whether they learned Austrian economics 100 years ago or today, hopefully at some point people start figuring this stuff out, because it's really just embarrassing to watch people like Krugman on CNN talking about his plans. And Keynes even had the same plan. He said if we took dollars and we put them into bottles and we dug big holes, and like everyone dug huge holes, everyone in society, and we buried them, and then we covered the hole up, and then we all went back, we dug it up, we'd all be better off. It's a completely insane theory that somehow has just managed to go on and on and on for decades, and it's now in the final collapse, thankfully. And they're going to learn Austrian economics one way or another, and it's probably going to be the hard way at this point.
Well, unless they institute, the financial repression, because they're not going to allow, Jeff, those normal conventional bottom vigilantes to send those free market force messages to the politicians. The central bankers, the Fed's trying to stop that. I want to transition here a little bit more. You talked a great job about the broken window fallacy there for people who are not familiar with Austrian economics, and how, there's a tremendous misallocation of capital from the conventional mainstream economics people. But I want to talk about a specific part of the welfare warfare state that you have a unique perspective on since you've moved down to Mexico. I want to talk about your perspective and the Mexicans that live around your perspective about the U.S. government's war on drugs that's lasted, the last, since the 60s and 70s really, and all the trillions of dollars that have been spent on the war on drugs.
Yeah, I'm so angry at the war on drugs. It's really been just destroying the world now for decades, and If people would just look back in history at when they made alcohol illegal in the U.S. In the 30s, and it was prohibition. There was headless bodies in the streets of Chicago every day, gang warfare. And so what happens now? We've had this war on drugs that they've taken worldwide now, and all the governments have all gotten on board with it because, it's great for government because when you have this so-called making drugs illegal, then you need a lot of government to make sure that no one can do drugs. Well, of course, everyone still does drugs, but you just need all this government. So that's why governments really love the war on drugs.
It's great for the prison industry, too. The prison stocks are up. That's part of our GDP now, unfortunately.
Yeah, oh, totally, and this is all part of the system that's in the U.S. right now. And it's really just horrible what's going on. And yeah, so I've been down here in Mexico. I've traveled the world for many years, so I've had a lot of perspectives. I've been to almost 100 countries, and I used to live in Thailand. And I usually tend to live in places where they actually have some freedom. So that's why I'm in Mexico, because the U.S. now is one of the least free places on earth. You really can't hardly do anything there anymore, including starting a business or anything like that because of all the rules and regulations and all that sort of thing. So yes, I'm down here in Mexico, and this drug war thing is definitely affecting people down here. In my opinion, the U.S. government's been trying to destabilize Mexico for some time now. If you remember, they planted the swine flu here 2 days after Barack Obama was in Mexico City. Swine flu all of a sudden popped up about 100 miles away from where he was with all his FBI guys and the CIA guys and all that. This whole swine flu thing has been proven to be a complete scam, a complete sham. It was made in a laboratory, probably by the U.S. government. So they tried that, and that worked for a while here. There wasn't much tourism for a few months after that, and then everyone realized that was just complete BS. And now they've been really ramping up the drug thing, and they've been actually funneling weapons. And this is actually admitted by the FBI and the CIA and all of them, that they have this program where they've been putting like thousands and thousands of fully automatic weapons and giving them to the drug cartel guys in Mexico for the last year or two. And so all these guys started shooting each other, and because drugs are illegal, and the government down here is also involved in the drug trade, because the government here is basically like a drug cartel. They're just another one of them. So when you hear about drug cartels fighting the government here, that's just a drug cartel fighting another drug cartel is all it is. But the sad thing is that this whole thing it would be over in 1 second if drugs were legal. And the whole making drugs illegal has just caused, like you said, trillions of dollars to have been wiped out, and that you never get that money back. So this is wealth taken away from people. The hundreds of thousands of people in jail in the U.S. for just smoking a marijuana joint, which every U.S. president for the last 30 years has said they've also done. Like, the hypocrisy is absolutely unbelievable. And every day, just thousands of people are getting killed or thrown in jail, and the amount of money being wasted is just horrendous. And and if you talk to people and they say, oh, well, I think drugs should be illegal, and you say why, and they say because drugs are bad. Well, making drugs illegal doesn't make people stop doing drugs. In fact, it's actually been shown now that if drugs are illegal, people do more drugs. And that was shown in Portugal, where they made all drugs legal about 10 years ago, and the drug use went down. And so it's just completely horrible. And this is, if there's one thing we could do to change the world for the better, it would be just to legalize all drugs. We'd get rid of a lot of the police state. We'd get rid of, you think about it when you come through the borders and you come into the U.S. and those guys, they're all over you asking you questions. And you say to them, well, why am I getting strip searched every time I come to the U.S.? They go, well, you might have drugs. Well, if you take that excuse away from them, then they only have the last one left, which is their other bogeyman, which is terrorists. And, even that would be just so obvious that, Granny's not a terrorist, although they still pat down grannies and little kids, so who knows. But, yes, I'm very angry about the whole drug war, and, I see it down here a lot in Mexico. I just read the news of people dying, and Mexico used to be such a peaceful place, and it's just really being ruined because of all the drug war stuff. So hopefully something happens. And if there's one good thing about the coming collapse of the U.S. dollar and most of the U.S. government, hopefully, is they won't have the money to conduct these stupid, ridiculous policies anymore. So that's another reason to hope the U.S. dollar collapses.
Yeah, I think students, American students have been conditioned from a very young age, with that DARE program, drug abuse resistance education program, started in schools, elementary schools, that all drugs are bad. But, having seen these documentaries, I mean, wouldn't it actually benefit the governments if, the drugs were taxed and regulated? If American farmers were growing marijuana and, a broke country, a broke state like California, which is raising, property taxes on all its residences, wouldn't California, make a lot of money having its farmers grow, marijuana and then, having cafes with marijuana licenses and stuff like that? And, they could regulate it and make it safe and have a standardization and process. Not, that I like government, regulating all these things, but from a government perspective, don't you think that would be a better rational thing to do than actually, go outlaw and start this war? And I just think there's so many lobbying dollars now after watching, some of these drug documentaries about the other perspective that you were talking about. I think there's so much alcohol and tobacco money, because alcohol and tobacco are very addictive too. And, their job, a lot of these companies, they want to stop the marijuana because they see, marijuana as a competition to alcohol and tobacco, even though, both tobacco and cigarettes and alcohol are both very addictive. Perhaps, the studies say even more addictive than marijuana.
Oh, totally. The amount of people killed every year by cigarettes is over a few 100,000 per year. It's about 400,000, I think, in the U.S. The amount of people killed by alcohol and alcohol-related deaths is a few 100,000 as well. The amount of people killed every year by marijuana, 0. And it is a lot of the reason this isn't being changed is because the pharmaceutical companies, and like you said as well, the alcohol and tobacco companies don't want the competition, and the pharmaceutical companies don't want the competition as well, because marijuana actually is a much better therapy for the majority of the things that Americans have than all of these chemicals that these drug companies make. And if someone can just grow a marijuana plant in their backyard and all of their symptoms of dying from cancer just basically go away, that takes away a lot of money from the pharmaceutical companies, who basically are one and the same with the government. It's become a very fascist place as well as communist. U.S. is becoming the worst of both worlds now. It's fascist, it's communist, it's just everything's just getting so screwed up there right now. But yes, totally. It's probably we need. I'm struggling for words right now because I'm trying to think how will this end. I have no idea, but it's just really terrible what's going on. Marijuana itself is actually a really great thing. It's so medicinal in many ways and healing. It's definitely much better than alcohol for sure. If whenever you see some of these riots, like the Vancouver hockey riots, I'm from Vancouver originally, so I paid attention to that one, and there was like 100,000 kids who were all drunk smashing stuff. If those were all kids on marijuana, they'd all just go to the park and sing some songs and eat chips, so it's really ridiculous. As with most things with government, it's just another ridiculous thing to have marijuana legal and alcohol is legal.
Yeah, if you think about it, if government made heroin and cocaine legal, do you think everybody will go out there and start using it? I mean, do people need the government to tell you what's good and what's bad for you? You ought to think for yourself and know that.
Oh yeah, and it's it's not like heroin and cocaine aren't available, right? So all the people who are doing those things right now, they'd be doing it whether it's legal or illegal. And you just look at this crystal meth, which actually is a real disaster of a drug, and the reason it exists is because it's the prices of cocaine and other things and marijuana get pushed up a lot by being illegal, and so a lot of people can't afford marijuana or cocaine, but they want something like that, and so they get crystal meth, which is basically made out of like bathroom detergents and really horrible chemicals. And you look at some of the people, and look. If you actually know anyone who's addicted to crystal meth, they look like zombies. They look like horrible. And, how many people are really going to do that if they actually had options or choices? There's such thing as social stigma and all that. And the biggest insult you could say to a person nowadays is, oh, that guy's a crystal meth addict, right? People don't do really horrible things to themselves unless they absolutely have to, and that's what happens with the crystal meth is they can't afford some of these other much healthier drugs, especially marijuana, and so they're forced to do these like really horrible drugs like crystal meth, and it just ruins their lives very quickly. And you're starting to see now that no one's really like this whole whenever you have a really horrible drug, it has a period of time where it's popular, and then everyone realizes it's horrible, and they just stop doing it. People still have their own brains. You know, government never protects us from anything. They just give people the illusion that they're protecting them.
Or if people, had jobs and, they had a girlfriend or a boyfriend, they're, happier, they had money in their pocket, they probably, wouldn't do some of these more disastrous drugs. I think, the economy there is, I was speaking with another person I met, around the D.C. area, someone who's starting to wake up, and they were talking about, just how depressing it is, working at a job you hate all the time, and, you want to go out there and, let loose, drink too much, do that stuff on the weekends, because, you're not finding any work situation or anything that makes you happy anymore.
Yeah, that's all a big part of it, and that's why it's just a big mess right now, because this U.S. dollar, this Federal Reserve System, has destroyed so many industries in the U.S. It's made manufacturing basically not economically possible anymore because the dollar's gone up so much compared to other countries, so other countries now have an advantage in that respect, and you just look at everything, and it's affected all sorts of life. And you look at a lot of people that are working in cubicles nowadays. Well, a lot of those industries are all like industries that probably wouldn't even exist if we didn't have this current Federal Reserve inflationary monetary system. And, everything. Like, just if you, like, for a person like myself who travels a lot, whenever I go to the U.S., I want to do heroin, man. I want to kill myself. Like, you can't do anything. Like, you try to just walk outside of a bar to talk to a friend with a drink, and you'll end up in handcuffs. And you get in your car, and you gotta like make sure you're watching for cops, and you look into the speed limit, and you make sure you don't go 3 miles per hour over, or you're going to get stopped. And there's basically so little freedom there that's why a lot of people are on so many pharmaceuticals now, things like Prozac and all those sort of things. But all of those are way worse than the natural drugs, drugs like marijuana and things like that. And it's being shown now that a lot of these things, these Prozacs and Adderalls and all these things, are horrible. They're just terrible, and a lot of people end up killing themselves when they do these drugs. So yeah, the whole system is screwed, and it's all tied together. Every single thing we've talked about so far is all actually tied together, and it's all been caused by this government system and the central bank system.
And interesting enough, that's one of Ron Paul's policy, if he ever gets into office, that he will make all drug legal because he believes in liberty and that people should think for themselves and they should know what's not good and what's good for you. But going back to Mexico, you moved to Mexico. What is the positive and negative for Americans that want to move to Mexico?
I think it's almost all positives at this point. There's not many negatives. They really, I know so many people moving here and moving out of the U.S. right now. And I'm actually Canadian. And when I say the U.S., I mean Canada as well. It's basically the same in Canada. Most of the Western world now has just become so regulated. And you really don't, and I know, Jason, you were down here in Mexico a week or two ago. You could probably tell as well as I can. Did you have a good time down here?
Yeah, I had a good time, and, I met a lot of interesting people, and, just people who are entrepreneurial, people who, made their own goods, who are trying to produce before they consume, who are trying to save, a certain amount of money. Just, basically what, America, what the U.S. was founded on, what my great-grandparents came to the U.S. for, to start their own business, which was the real American dream, not, to own your own house with a lot of debt.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And again, down here in Mexico, they don't really have this whole debt system. They don't even have mortgages for houses. So if you want a house, you have to have the money for the house. And again, all those these things they've built up over the years. And of course, the reason that you need mortgages in the U.S. to get a house now is because no one can afford it because they've all been impoverished so much by this system. And yeah, it's really like Jason said, it's quite amazing to live in a place where people are still real and they don't have a lot of debt and they don't really want a lot of debt, and they're quite happy and they just produce, and most people down here are just happy and you don't really have any problems. And it's not just the weather. The weather is part of it for sure, but it's just the total government system, and unfortunately this whole U.S. War on drugs is starting to really cause major problems down here. But before that, it was real paradise down here. It was just amazing, and there's so many places like that. Like I'm actually looking at, I actually did buy a place in Argentina just recently, and I'm going down there again in November. And that's another country, like there is a lot of freedom, and a lot of people say, and I know what a lot of Americans are thinking because they read the media. And the U.S. media is basically all propaganda, and they say things like, "Oh, Mexico's, it's a failed state," and I love how they say that because. And
Americans are getting kidnapped, and like everyone's getting gunned down in the drug wars, and I was at Costa Maya for a day, and then I was at Cozumel, and there was tourism was being protected. It's a well-regarded industry down there, and I didn't see any problems. And like you said, I could tell a big-time attitude difference among the Mexican people there. They were happy. They didn't have a lot of stuff, but, they're trending upwards. They've definitely learned to do more with less, and, they definitely seem more content than most Americans who, can't spare a minute, who, are running around with, like chickens with their head cut off, who are stressed out beyond measure and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. It's a totally different lifestyle down here, and as far as safety goes, it's all mostly stuff in the media that makes it sound like that. Do you know how many people get shot every weekend in Chicago? It's never less than 30. It's always somewhere between 30 and 60 every single weekend in Chicago. And down here, if a few people get shot, it'll be front page news in the U.S. and Mexico's a failed state, and it's total chaos. It's a civil war. All these sort of things. And you were down here, Jason, and it's the exact opposite of that. And that's what the media is trying to do right now, is to try to make Mexico seem terrible. And I think a big part of that is they want to stop Americans from coming down here for two reasons. One, they want to keep them in the U.S. so they can keep the dollars in the U.S. And two, if Americans see the lifestyle down here, they'll start asking questions up in the U.S. It's like, why are we so living in this police state when down there in supposedly a really dangerous place, there really is, the police don't bother you, there's nothing down here, like there really is no speed limits or anything, and it actually works a lot better because the more regulation there is, the more people just try to get around it, because that's regulation and all these sort of things and laws, that's not what free market is about. The only laws that matter are the natural laws, which are don't hurt or kill anybody and don't lie or steal, and that's basically all there is, and you don't need 70,000 pages of laws for all that.
I also noticed, Jeff, a big price differential. I ate at a pretty nice restaurant down in Cozumel. My entire family, we all had like chicken fajitas for lunch. And, the prices of the restaurants, quality meal, the food quality, it seemed like good organic, fruits and vegetables, and, really good chicken. And it was, quite a lot cheaper, like 30 or 40% cheaper. So is this like across all Mexico? Is this like what you see when you travel around there too?
Yeah, each place has their own prices differences. For example, Cancun and Cabo will be more expensive, and then more Mexican, like real Mexican, non-touristy places will be a lot less expensive. But you actually brought up another good point, and that is about the food down here. In the U.S., it's basically the food companies run how the food gets made, and a lot of it's all chemicals, and it's all these sort of things. Down here in Mexico, it's mostly still organic. Like all the food that we buy here all comes from the mercados. They're basically like flea markets. All the farmers come in, and all their food is basically organic, and it's way cheaper, and it's way better quality. And so yeah, it's just, and again, that's the government causing problems in the U.S. They've made it so they've like now they're trying to make in the U.S. All farmers, all people who own a farm, they have to get licenses to ride their farm equipment. And this is just yet another example of ways that they're trying to make it harder and harder and harder for just regular people to do regular things like have a farm. And, you look at the raw food, that people have raw milk, and they're just getting invaded by FBI and SWAT teams. And all they're trying to do is sell milk without chemicals and hormones in it. And this is what's going on in the U.S. right now. It's just absolutely insane, and that's a big part of the reason why I've been writing what I've been writing at the Dollar Vigilante. Is it's partly about what's going on with the U.S. dollar and the U.S. economy and the U.S. government collapse, and it's also about expatriation and things like that, because the way things are going in the U.S., I'm not sure what's going to happen. It's just getting worse and worse and worse, and nothing seems to be changing right now. So it's definitely going to be interesting times ahead in the U.S.
Well, I think in an endgame scenario, Jeff, I think things I've spoke with Adam Kokesh about this in the past, and I think things can go, one of two directions. I think we can go either total, totalitarian, like the authoritative police state, where was depicted, in V for Vendetta in 1984, and some of these other, movies and books, where people just say, I don't know, I can't, everything's too unstable, I don't know who to trust anymore. I'll just hand over all the stuff to government, and I'll just submit. Or we could go, complete anarchy, to an anarcho-capital, Rothbardian type of state where everything's completely privatized.
Yeah, I which side I'm hoping for, the anarchy side. I'm an anarchist. Anarchy, a lot of people, they take the word and they think it means something bad, because, again, the government, every time there's a riot or something, they always say those are anarchists, and the reason they do that is because they're very scared of the word anarchy, because the word anarchy just means without government. And it's actually the best and only best way to live. It's completely the only morally correct way, because you don't force anyone to do anything. It basically, all forms of government, no matter who they are, whether they're kings or they're democracies or a dictator or anything, and no matter how open they are to some things, if they're actually coercing people and using violence, which is the police and jails and taxes, which is theft, to do what they want, then they are morally just incorrect. And anarchism is actually what the U.S. was supposed to sort of be. That was sort of the ideas behind the U.S. They tried, the errors I think they made in the U.S. is they tried to make a constitution, and I think we've learned a lot from that, because I forget who quoted it, but someone once said that the second that you try to write down all of your rights on a piece of paper is the second that someone can start to basically take those rights away, and basically, and that's sort of what's happened with the U.S. with the Constitution, which is completely just a dead document now. Every single thing the U.S. government does is against what's in the Constitution. So, U.S. just kind of shows what they've tried. They started it as an anarchist system, but they tried to make it a little bit of a constitutional system, and even the democracy wasn't a big part of the U.S. when they first started it up, but they actually made the mistake of putting that in too, which just made the whole thing worse. And ever since then, it's been downhill, unfortunately. But that was the original idea of the U.S., was basically an anarchistic freedoms way of life, and it's just gone nowhere but downhill ever since then, unfortunately. And hopefully, like you said, Jason, hopefully with the coming problems, hopefully we don't end up like Nazi Germany and some sort of a dictator, and hopefully it goes the other way with a complete collapse of the government, and people just go back to being their own government, being responsible for themselves, and no welfare and nothing is illegal. You just do whatever you want except for hurt other people, basically, and have property rights and non-aggression principle. Just don't hurt anyone. That's all you really need to know. And we could have a real complete revolution in those terms. And a lot of people ask, well, how can the U.S. get back to being really great? And that's the answer, is to get rid of the government. The government is what's destroyed it. The central bank, which is an abomination. The Federal Reserve should never have existed. And it has nothing good. There's nothing positive it can do. It only can do bad things, and that's what it's done. And the U.S., the Americans just need to realize and to learn about things like libertarianism and anarchism and things like that, and get back to personal responsibility and not caring or not needing a government to do anything for you, and we can be back into prosperity in no time. But it's between then and now that's going to be the interesting times.
Jeff, I have one final topic here I want to cover, and there's a couple questions in this, so I'll take my time, reading this out here. since you have, very considerable and successful experience as an internet entrepreneur, having founded Stockhouse, I was wondering if you think the internet is the freest place left in the world, and what you think the future of entrepreneurship on the internet could look like, and if you think it will improve or worsen as governments, look for, excuses to run more controls over the internet through like net neutrality, using the terrorist guy, using, international intellectual property protection and other things. What do you think the internet then could look like then possibly in 10 years or 20 years from now?
The internet for sure is by far the freest place on earth still. And it's only because the governments have been slow to pick up to regulate it and to shut it down, basically. It's really, without the internet, I wouldn't have much hope. If it wasn't for the internet, I'd probably still live here in Mexico, but I'd basically be hiding. I wouldn't be doing anything but just hiding and hoping I can live a few more years, because without the internet, I see everything all these governments doing as being unstoppable. But thanks to the internet, people can actually find out the truth, because all of the truth is out there on the internet. You just have to search for it and use your own rational mind to find the truth and not listen to the lies. But if you just watch U.S. TV, for example, all you get is propaganda and lies, so you really don't get much access to any sort of truth. So yeah, the internet is by far the freest, and you can actually see that in the U.S. right now. It's kind of interesting. The one area that's actually still doing well in the U.S. is the Silicon Valley area. And that, of course, is because the internet still hasn't been regulated too much. And so that place, you look at it after the tech bubble, it really collapsed. And that tech bubble, of course, was caused by the Federal Reserve and its inflation. And so it caused all the tech bubble. And then it collapsed, and look how quickly it built itself back up. And now there's Google didn't exist in 1999, 2000 when the tech bubble collapsed. Facebook didn't exist. This is what happens when you have freedom and no regulation. There's no regulations to start up an internet company or start up an internet website, although they're trying to put them through now. Whereas if you try to even just become a barber in the U.S., you have to go to 6 months of school and get a license and adhere to all sorts of rules and regulations to open your own barber shop. And really, there'd be no – if I lived in the U.S., there'd be no way I would start a business. And that's part of the reason I'm here in Mexico is I've started a few businesses here, and I didn't even – there's no rules or regulations for most of these things, although they do have some, and they do have an income tax down here, which is unfortunate. But you can just start up companies down here and just go with it. And I've got a hotel, and I've got I sell condos, a real estate company, and you don't need licenses or anything to do these things, so you just do them. If I was in the U.S., there's no way I'd open a hotel or a real estate company. There's just be too much hoops and regulations and taxes and all those sort of things. So. Definitely, the internet there's so much potential, and really, if you're an entrepreneur, even if you don't do a 100% specific business on the internet, for example, I'll give you an example. There's so many opportunities in different countries to go to because a lot of them are behind where the U.S. has been. Not all of them, like a lot of Asian countries are ahead, but there's countries like Mexico or most Latin American countries, except for maybe Chile, are quite a little bit behind the U.S. And so a lot of the people haven't figured out how to make a lot of money on the internet. If you go to some place, you can just see the opportunities. I'll give you an example down here in Mexico. I have a friend, and all he did was he just found out the prices of a bunch of hotels in Mexico, and they don't even have their own websites, a lot of these hotels, and he just offered it up on his website, and he said, look, you can book, sort of like an Expedia for Mexico, and there's no rules or regulations, just start it up, no real big upfront costs, and, he rents 20, 30 rooms a night, which gets him, decent money every single day, and it really didn't cost him anything. So there's tons of opportunity thanks to the internet. If the internet never was founded by Al Gore, we'd really be in a tough we'd really be in a tough spot right now. But thankfully, Al Gore discovered the internet, and so we still have our last chance at freedom through the internet. And you can also find out all sorts of information, like your guys' information or information on anarchism or anything you want to find out, because you couldn't find that information before the
or
internet.
Mises, or the Mises Institute.
Yep.
And that's what I love about the internet is the internet entrepreneurs, guys like you and hopefully me someday. And what we're doing is trying to, correct market inefficiencies, trying to help solve people's problems, trying to make a difference. We're voluntarists. We're voluntarily trying to work for a profit to, help people out. And, that the Internet makes it easier to connect people. Like, I never would have met you, without the Internet, without, listening to your interview on Jay Taylor's radio show. And then I heard you were on Facebook, and I was like, okay, I'll take the risk. I'll try to contact him and see if he contacts me back. So.
Yeah, no, without the Internet, I wouldn't know any of the stuff I know right now, even. Like you said, Mises, who's a great Austrian economics guy. You can't get these books anywhere in the old way before the Internet. They weren't even, well, first, they were never in schools. Even if you got your doctorate in economics in the U.S., you would have never even heard of Mises. And it's not even in the public libraries or anything. So you literally couldn't find these books. I don't know how people knew about this stuff before the Internet, because it's almost impossible to find out about it. But with the Internet, it's actually really easy. So this is our chance. This is our opportunity for freedom, and this is our opportunity to survive the coming problems that are going to be caused by the collapsing U.S. dollar and the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government. I'm quite optimistic because of all of this. A lot of people say, "Oh, you think the dollar's going to collapse? You're such a pessimist." And I say, "No, I'm an optimist, because this system, the U.S. dollar, is not what it was supposed to be. It's a Federal Reserve note, and it's a liability, and it's inflated by a bunch of secretive bankers, and it's really caused way more problems than it's helped with anything. And if we can get back to some sort of a real free market type economic system, the amount of prosperity we would have, people have no idea how prosperous and how happy and how wonderful the world would be. There'd be no wars. You can't have wars without central banks, because, like I explained earlier, we'd live in such a better place. So thanks to the Internet, we can all be prepared for what's going to happen, and we can also take advantage of it and prosper from it, from a lot of the stocks you guys are recommending. Anything hard asset I'm a fan of. And, and once we get through this, there'll be also tons of opportunities, because a lot of people have been so brainwashed, and you've said it yourself. You said earlier, some people here have been waking up, and it's true. People literally are brainwashed nowadays, because they've been put into these government education and indoctrination camps for the first 18 years of their life, and everything they see on the TV news is all propaganda. So people are literally brainwashed, and a lot of those people will be either learn the easy way by learning now, or learn the hard way when it all collapses. And
And they memorize, sorry to interrupt you, Jeff, and, they memorize, the Keynesian economic textbooks, the MMT Keynesian economic textbooks. They got an A on it, but they fail, the common sense test and the real life stuff, and it doesn't help them make any money or help them with their businesses.
That's right. And so, when this all starts to collapse, there are going to be so many opportunities for entrepreneurs. And really, the people that will be there to kind of help build the new world after this collapse will be people such as ourselves, people who understand the true reality, the Austrian side of the economics, which is just basically the truth about economics, and how governments are more of a problem than a help to anything. And most people still haven't grown out of that paradigm, and they're really going to learn the hard way in the next few years that all of that was false. It was artificial. It was not a real thing, and a lot of the U.S. way of life for the last 30 years has been built on a fake system that is all in the process of collapsing. And the sooner that people can wake up and realize that, the better it'll be for them and their families and for everyone.
It's safe to say that the next couple of decades will be very interesting in this country.
And very different.
Yes, very different
than the last decades before. As the Americans, have to learn to do more with less, produce before they consume. This is going to require, exactly like Jeff said, a complete, fundamental paradigm shift, and it's not going to be a comfortable one.
Yeah, for those that aren't expecting it at all and who still live 100% in the artificial world and believe all the stuff they're told on TV, believe everything that the government tells them, it's going to be a really hard shock for them. And,
Well, Jeff, thank you for coming on to the Wall Street for Main Street podcast. If people want to find more about you and what you do, where can they go?
Oh, thank you. It's been my pleasure, guys. If they want to find out about me, they can go to our website, just dollarvigilante.com. We have a free blog on there. You just put your email in, and you can hear all these sort of things I've been talking about with you guys. I talk about it daily, and I just launched another anarchy video podcast called Anarchast. It's ANARCHAST.com, and we just do video podcasts about anarchy. So those are the two big things I've been doing lately.
And Jeff, I just want to, thank you for your time and your insights. And, we hope to be able to speak with you again sometime and bring you back on here in the future.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, guys, and I hope to be on again sometime soon.